Hello there, I'm George Hall, and welcome back to one of our Analytics Anonymous sessions, where we take a bite-sized look at data, insight, analytics, and more. I'm joined today by Ed Jackson, one of Good Growth's analytical managers. Ed, how are you?
Good to be back, George. I completely forgot about my new job title change until you just said it.
Always a nice surprise to be reminded, isn't it? Look, Ed, great to have you back. We're here today to talk about what I think is quite an interesting topic, really. This idea of where does data, where does insight come from when customers stop engaging with businesses online, be it websites, online stores, whatever it might be. Would you mind sort of giving an introduction as to one, why that might happen, and two, why would it be a concern for businesses?
It's definitely a difficult challenge to sort of get your head around and understand that there are obviously macro and micro factors at play here. We could be talking about a whole industry downturn, which is quite common to see. But as a brand, you can always do things to protect yourself from that and be the brand that survives it. You look at the holiday industry, how we saw Thomas Cook, First Choice, all go under, and TUI essentially absorb them all. But when customers aren't engaging with your brand in particular, what can you do? Why are they not engaging with your brand? Is it the proposition? Is it how easy it is to use your site? Really understanding what the problem is. And I think the biggest problem for businesses in understanding this is it's quite easy when you're in the weeds of it and when you're in your data every day to know, I've had a bad month, the next month is slightly better. But how real is that? If you've had a bad October and November's slightly better, is November actually slightly better, or year on year are you still further down? Is the delta a greater difference? So you might see it as a positive month, but in October, say you were down 10% year on year, and in November you're down 20% year on year, but your numbers are still better than October. You've not recovered, actually, and you're still on that downward trend. And I think that's the thing we see in businesses. It's very difficult for them to understand and for them to really get a grasp of until quite often it's too late.
Now, you mentioned getting a grasp there. If businesses are concerned about a lack of engagement, are there key data points that they should be looking at that will sort of be the telltale signs that there's a disengagement?
Yeah, so like I discussed then, zooming out, I think, is something that's very, very useful in these cases, rather than looking at a week on week, month on month. Look at year on year, look at the past 24, 36 months and see how you're performing. Looking at not only conversion rate to transaction of the site, but add to cart rate, views of PDPs, PLPs, the amount of time users are spending on your site as well. If you're spending a lot of money acquiring customers from social media, typically they're on the site for a lot less time. So as you end up in this sort of death spiral situation where engagement is lower, so you start investing more in social media marketing, you start investing more in TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're getting. You get those clicks, you get those sessions up, but actually your page views per session, your session duration is just going down and down and down because you're buying customers, you're buying eyes from a less valuable resource.
And I guess when those traditional metrics, your classic, your clicks, those sort of engagements, when they start dipping, it makes sense to look elsewhere just to be sure and to get a better understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's when it becomes, if you do start to see yourself in that sort of situation, look at what you're presenting to your customers in your marketing information. There are a few companies we work with where what they thought was their USP and their key selling point actually wasn't resonating with customers, and it's something entirely different that really is resonating, and that's where we can pull out that insight.
And then would you say that there's early warning signs for businesses, sort of moments when the alarm bells start ringing, or it might be a bit of a silent alarm? What should businesses be looking out for that would trigger kind of an awareness or a pre-warning of disengagement from consumers?
It's a very difficult one. It's certainly a case-by-case basis. I would say looking at your acquisition channels and how that shifts over time. If you see a shift away from direct customers and more into paid search, branded search, things like that. If there is a slow shift in those acquisition channels, but then also, like I said, if you're seeing a consistent decrease in session duration and the number of page views per session, that would also be getting alarm bells ringing for me.
Sure. And then obviously at Good Growth, as you're well aware, we pride ourselves on the data, the insight and the tech as sort of a triumvirate of approaches. I'm interested in that tech part and how the tech can be used, I guess, one, to preempt this happening and two, to rectify it.
it's quite an interesting one that we're actually currently working on building out schema for and understanding it. Obviously, Google Analytics, Adobe Analytics are very, very good at understanding user purchase journeys, understanding that user who's got to a transaction, what have they gone through, how have they got there. But that ends up in a situation where we could have a bit of survivorship bias. We're only seeing the users that are successful, so we fail to see users that fail. And you can do things around segmentation to try and mitigate the risk of that, but understanding how user behavior is fundamentally different in users who are succeeding versus users that are failing is something that's very difficult to do in traditional analytical platforms.
And then to start wrapping things up, there obviously might be people listening thinking, I'm experiencing this right now, or I'm starting to see it, or maybe it's not happened yet, but I want to be aware of this and I want to take those steps. What actionable step could a business take to either prevent customers from disengaging or to sort of stop the issue in its tracks?
I think a really interesting one is, so say you don't know whether it's a whole industry downturn or whether it's you specifically that are struggling. You obviously can't go and look at your competitors' internal data. You can't see how they're transacting. Depending on the size of your business, you might be able to go look at earnings calls and things like that on the stock exchange, see how they're performing there. But a really nice, simple indicator is something like Google Trends. So let's say, for example, we're working with Microsoft and they're saying, well, Xbox sales are down, but we think it's an industry-wide thing. It's really easy to see how the industry-wide engagement is. Go on Google Trends, put in Xbox, PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch. If you see, there is the trend that all of those engagement with them is going down, okay, maybe you've got something there. But if you see that PlayStation and Nintendo Switch are performing better than ever before, while you're still struggling at Xbox, I think there's something to look at there.
We do seem to love a video game analogy on the Good Growth podcast, don't we? I know David Watkins has often mentioned his Google Stadia, which sadly is no more. Ed, it's been great to talk to you, great to get your thoughts on this topic. You've been listening to Analytics Anonymous on the Good Growth podcast, and if we've piqued your interest or you want to know more, please do get in touch. Thanks for listening.